And now, Pat, when we identified some of the problems before, let's address what the authority is doing and to help the farming community in these regards. And for instance, with regard to water quality, what's going on with that issue now?
With water quality, there has been, I suppose, a lot of controversy in recent years. The introduction of the first nitrates action plan caused significant problems for farmers, and those have been implemented over a period of years, and the limits that were put in place on fertilizer required a change in practice of amongst farmers in terms of developing nutrient management plans to manage their farms within the limits. Teagasc has worked with farmers intensively over the period to support that process, to convince farmers that the limits that were put in place are sufficient to meet their agronomic needs if farmed correctly, and also that in terms of the use of organic fertilizers, that best practice in use of those organic fertilizers not only improved environmental outcomes but also improved the economic benefit of those organic fertilizers to the farm, so that there was increasingly a realization that the legislative restrictions that were being put in place actually have some basis in science and have been to the benefit of farms.
You also mentioned to me a whole new program called the catchment program within the authority.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the audience what that is?
The Agricultural Catchments Program was established as a monitoring initiative within the Nitrates Action Plan, where 6 river catchments have been established, whereby there is intensive work going on with the farmers in a river catchment area, a small river catchment area, where the nutrient movement in that catchment area is intensively examined, both in terms of the nutrient usage of organic and chemical fertilizer, but also then at the water level, where the streams are intensively examined and mechanized to measure the total amount of nutrient coming out in water quality. And it also looks then at practices on the farms, the impact of those practices on water quality, the dynamics really of the nutrient loss on those farms, and also is intensively looking at the actual water quality and any issues, any problems with water quality, where what the sources of those problems are, because there are other issues other than agricultural sources, and it's trying to in some way establish the degree of problem that's coming from different sources. But it's also going in and looking at a number of other things. One, for instance, is it's looking at the impact of nutrients in water on the biodiversity in water.
Now, is it also with the catchment program, they're doing an attitudinal study with the farming, which I
absolutely,
thought was interesting.
In terms of the farmers' attitudes, there's an attitudinal survey being done to establish baseline attitudes of farmers to environmental issues, and looking at, they will be examined over a period of years, looking at the catchments program, where there's intensive advisory work going on with farmers, there's intensive support for them in terms of dealing with environmental issues, versus if you want a controlled sample where that kind of level of work will not be happening to the same extent. So it's trying to, I suppose, ascertain two things. What are the attitudes of farmers to environmental issues, and are there particular ways that we can change those attitudes and improve the environmental outcomes? So that will be an integral part of the program over the next number of years.
The Harvest 2020 program, and what its targets are for increase in production in the agricultural sector. Why don't you tell the audience what that is?
Okay, the targets for Harvest 2020 are for I suppose the most striking one is a 50% increase in dairy output. There's also a target for a 20% increase in beef value. In terms of greenhouse gases, that is going to pose a major challenge. In 1984, I think, milk quotas were established across the EU, and at that time, milk production in Ireland was expanding rapidly. So it put a cap on milk production, and that was followed in subsequent years by caps on other areas of production, such as beef and cereal production. Over a period of years, the caps on beef production and cereal production have been effectively lifted as international shortages of those commodities have emerged. But the cap has remained on dairy production in form of quotas. Those quotas are due to be lifted in March 2015. Ireland has developed a dairy industry which is based on a low-cost grass model, and we see ourselves as having the capacity to increase our production of dairy and profitably.
With great value to the export.
With a huge value to the export, to exports and national economy.
But now, Pat, how do we reconcile that 50% increase with in the dairy field with the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets of the EU of 20%, and those really seem to be in direct conflict.
Okay, and there is likely to be continued conflict in that area. It will be impossible to achieve that level of increase without some level of increase in greenhouse gases. I don't think there's any question about that, because greenhouse gases in the agricultural sector are particularly intractable, particularly in relation to enteric fermentation. However, there are a number of initiatives, and there are a number that we are taking on board in terms of trying to reduce the overall level of greenhouse gas per unit of production. Efficiency in production is one of the key issues there. And there's a number of areas that Teagasc is targeting to try and improve efficiency per unit of output. Some of the key areas there include the breeding index, the breeding value of the herd, and the efficiency coming from that. So the EBI is the economic breeding index, and a huge focus has gone on in the last number of years to try and improve the generic merit of the dairy herd within Ireland, and in so doing to improve the efficiency with which milk is produced. I think the other main areas relate to improving the efficiency in terms of the yield per cow, but also in terms of improving the efficiency of use of fertilizers in the dairy production system. And that encompasses both the effective use of organic fertilizers as part of a nutrient management plan, but also then the efficient use of chemical fertilizers and the maximization of grassland management, so that we get the maximum grass growth for the minimum level of fertilizer input. And in those ways we have a capacity to reduce greenhouse gas per unit of output by about 20% through efficiencies, and that's where we're targeting. So while there is an overall increase of potentially 50%, we think over a period of 7-8 years we can potentially achieve 20% per unit reduction in terms of efficiencies. And also then there's likely to be a substitution effect between the beef herd and the dairy herd, which will mean that we are unlikely to get a 30% increase, but something less than that in terms of the greenhouse gas efficiency. But it remains a problem, and it remains a risk to the expansion that's being envisaged.